Instead, I let him know a cusp had already come and gone. That night, I called him from the basement after listening to the recordings from the cell phone intercept. The information so gathered wasn't legal, but we weren't expecting to use it in court. Carl answered on the second ring. "Carl?" I asked. My voice was thick with emotion, and he picked up on it immediately. "Oh, geez," he said. "What's happened?" The concern he felt was evident. I took a deep breath and held it for a moment to get control of myself. "You know the cell phone and landline intercepts I had you install when we built the house?" I asked. "Yeah, sorry we couldn't get over there today and set up the remote monitoring equipment, but..." "Oh, I know. Carl, there's only 26 hours in a day, right? Don't think anything about it. Anyway, Carl, I have a recorded conversation between Laura and some guy called Brian about 7 p.m. I drew in a ragged lungful of air and continued. "You'll be able to hear it yourself tomorrow, I guess, but Brian talked of F Laura's brains out again soon. To quote the son of A.B., I wanted to cry, but I wouldn't let the tears form. I couldn't stop the ball of ice from forming in the pit of my stomach. My body felt wooden, as if I were surrounded by massive layers of cotton that deadened every sensation. My chest hurt. I couldn't breathe. Laura was having it with some other guy, and I didn't know why. I couldn't think of any reason I'd given her for going outside the marriage for S, and I didn't know why she would betray me and our daughter this way. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. "Anyway, Carl," I said when I had enough control, "that changes our focus. I'm going to call Pete tomorrow morning and start the process of divorcing Laura, so I guess what we need now is to get all the evidence we can find." Pete was Peter Robinson, a high-powered lawyer on retainer for MA Industries, and also my personal attorney. "Yeah, Mark, I guess there's not much else we can do," Carl said. "If you're enjoying my content, consider joining my Patreon community. By becoming a patron, you'll get access to full parts of my videos much earlier than everyone else. Plus, you'll be supporting me to create even more awesome content for you. Check out the link in the description to join now." His words slow and halting. Mark, I'm just so sorry," he said. "I don't have the words to tell you how sorry I am," he told me. His empathy helped some. "Yeah, I know, Carl," I replied, my voice a little stronger. "Thanks, partner. But it's on Laura's head. It's no one else's fault, but I have a little girl who's going to be devastated. She and I are the victims, and I don't understand why Laura did this." I focused my attention. I didn't want to play the long-suffering husband beyond this single maudlin moment. "Okay, well, I just wanted you to know we'll be working in a different direction effective immediately," I told him. "I'll see you in the office tomorrow morning, okay?" "Sure, Mark," he agreed. "Hey, take it easy tonight, okay? Don't do anything you'll regret, boss," he said earnestly. I knew he was warning me not to do anything to physically harm my wife. "I'm okay, Carl," I told him. "I ran the tape on this intercept 3 hours ago, and I'm already way beyond that." I hesitated a moment. "I will tell you, Carl, I won't be sleeping with her tonight or any other night. I'll have to figure out some excuse, but I won't sleep with a woman that stabs me in the back figuratively or actually. There are things I can do and things I cannot do. I know it'll make the investigation harder, but I just can't." My voice cracked with the final words, but Carl didn't remark on it. "That's okay," he said soothingly. "It might take a little longer, Mark, but people who are doing these sort of things always think they're smarter than the rest of us. They're convinced they can keep their adultery hidden from their spouse, as well as the rest of the world, and they have no clue what they're doing is predictable and pretty easy to track." I didn't say anything. "Well, you hang in there, boss," Carl told me. "This will all come out okay. No matter how it gets taken care of. You hear me? You're going to come out the other side of this, stronger than you went in. Okay? One way or the other." "Yeah, I will," I replied, but I didn't believe it. All I saw was a black hole full of suffering and humiliation ahead for me and my daughter. I hadn't even begun to consider all the heartache this was going to cause her. "Okay, Mark, call me if you need me for anything, all right? Call me even if it's just to talk, okay?" I told him I would and pressed the off button on my cell phone. I turned the intercept equipment back on to catch any more communications between my dear wife and whoever it was she was F. I slept in a guest bedroom down the hall that night, telling Laura I had a dry throat and some congestion that might make me snore pretty badly. She agreed quickly and without comment. Besides, I told her, it would be closer to Alyssa if she might need one of us in the night. That our little girl had wet the bed a couple of times last week was news to Laura, but she shrugged her shoulders and went back to her magazine. What I recognized as an emotional problem our daughter was experiencing made no impression on Laura. Carl came to me with a preliminary report the next afternoon. Laura's S-buddy was Brian Collier, one of the accounting executives in the same office where Laura worked. He was one of 3 division supervisors, as was Laura. He was married and had a boy who was 9 years old and a 7-year-old girl. His wife was Pamela, a part-time insurance agent in an office across town. Brian was 38, a little taller than I was but quite a bit slighter. I'd been an amateur boxer in the Golden Gloves organization in my early teens and had gotten into weightlifting to improve my upper body strength and leg stamina. I dropped the boxing when I went to college, but I still lifted a couple of times a week. Mr. Collier, as he appeared in the one photo Carl had found so far, was more of a runner, if he was an athlete at all. I didn't know what women considered handsome, but I guessed he might be good-looking to the ordinary female, but not exceptionally so. Overall, I wasn't terribly impressed. I wondered it was about him that would tempt Laura to disregard our wedding vows so flagrantly and meet this joker for us. Carl had obtained a full 2-year history of Laura's phone records, bribing a contact he had with the phone company, and some of his people had gone over them quickly. A first analysis showed that there were initially only a few phone calls between the two over widely separated occasions. A little less than 6 months ago, the calls had begun to be a weekly event and eventually a daily one. Now, they were occurring 2 or 3 times a day, usually at night or early in the morning. Carl knew what time I came into work, and he told me unequivocally the two were talking almost every morning after I left the house. The evening calls were almost always initiated by Laura and were undoubtedly made when Laura could be sure I would not overhear. Probably when I was down in the basement lifting weights while my daughter kept me company. The timing was about right for my normal workout periods. Do you have anything you can tell me about what happened about the time the phone calls began to spike? Carl asked. He was being very businesslike about it all, and I appreciated that. It made it marginally easier to deal with it from my end. I leaned back in my chair to think, and even propped my feet up on the near corner of my desk. Seeing me relax a little, Carl did the same on the other side of the desk. Suddenly it came to me. Oh, well, maybe not. She went to a training seminar a couple of weeks before that in Chicago with a company that had hired her firm to audit their financial records. I said uncertainly. I was remembering more as I thought about it. You know, I said. I stopped while a fragment of a memory coalesced into something I could see in my mind. I took Laura to the airport for that, I said slowly, and this guy was there too, getting on the same plane. I can remember it clear as a bell. Okay, Carl said confidently. I'll have my folks keep on looking for another nexus, but I think we'll find that that seminar was the beginning of this whole mess. Too many things are pointing toward it. I nodded. I'm not a man who believes in coincidences either. Carl checked his notepad. That's it for now, boss, he said. We got the credit card issuers to email us digital copies of all the activity for the past year. It helps that you and Laura have joint accounts on all of them. Oh, that reminds me. We'll be looking at your bank records later today also, to see if there's anything there. I'll let you know what we find out, okay? I was impressed by the volume and depth of information that had already been accumulated. They'd only been working on the case for parts of 2 days. How did you get all that without my authorization? I asked. I wondered if I really shouldn't pitch a fit with the banks and phone companies about releasing private information so easily. Carl grinned. You authorized all of it, he said. I let my eyebrows rise questioningly. He chuckled. Boss, you got no idea what you're signing when Maggie puts a stack of paperwork in front of you, huh? I had to smile and nod. The grin dropped from my face. I used to say I trusted Maggie almost as much as I did my wife. Now Maggie had the top slot. Okay, I said, raising my hands in surrender. Go forth and do battle with the bad guys. And girls, I told him. By Thursday, Carl and his team had accumulated a massive pile of information about my wife and her new partner. 2 investigators had been dispatched to Chicago, and they'd already turned up a half-dozen people at the company hosting the seminars who remembered Laura and Brian as being very close. One of the desk clerks, a witness to most of their hijinks, had thought they were married to each other before he noticed their different surnames. Another 3 or 4 people at the hotel where Laura and Brian stayed recalled them as frequent visitors to the lounge, where they imbibed considerable quantities of liquor. Apparently, they would stumble to the elevator and up to one room or the other in the early hours of the morning. The lounge manager had to ask them to tone down their risque behavior on 2 occasions. Carl's 2 investigators said they were negotiating with the hotel management to see if the security camera tapes from that period were still available and whether they might be obtained for a reasonable fee. Carl told me with a grin that was a euphemism for an under-the-table transfer of tapes for greenbacks. I nodded. I'd understood that from his tone of voice. His freelance operative had been called in for a temporary assignment in Laura's office much earlier than expected, as she was already reporting that Brian and Laura were an item around the office. Apparently, their mutual boss knew about it too, and he'd admonished them several times to keep their affair out of the workplace. Laura, it was said, had already lost a merit increase on her salary because of a poor performance report based on her conduct. I marked that in my memory. My attorney would be interested in hearing of a firm that didn't do much of anything to stop clear violations of the morals clauses written into their employees' contracts.